Welcome to Bits and Pieces Quilting. Today I have a free tutorial and a free pattern to show you how to make the 3-course meal table runner. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Michelle, and today we're going to make the 3-course meal table runner. It's this table runner right here. It's got 3 panels, which is why I'm calling it the 3-course meal. It's an original pattern you can download from my website. So go on, get the pattern, come on back, and let's make this together. And be sure to stay till the end because I have a bonus project to show you as well. The cutting for the 3-course meal table runner is quite simple. You need 2 feature fabrics and a background fabric. And for a 3-course meal, for 3 separate designs across your table runner, you will need, for each of the designs, you'll need 4 of the one contrasting fabric, which is 3.5 by 6.5, 4 of the squares that are 3.5 by 6.5, and then 8 background pieces. So for 3 blocks in total, I have 12 of the 3.5 by 6.5, 12 of the 3.5-inch squares, and 3 times 8, 3 times 8, so 24 background squares. So the first step is to take 4 background squares for each block and draw a diagonal line across the back. That's going to be your stitching line in order to use the sew and flip method to put a square off of the end of each of the 3.5 by 6.5-inch rectangles. So with my ruler, a pencil, I'm just going to quickly draw a line across diagonally like this, across the back of each of these 4 blocks. I'll take these over to the sewing machine and I will put them on the rectangular background blocks like this. Hang on, let me check. Like this. They get set like this. All of this detail will be in the free pattern that you can download from my website. I'm going to sew directly on the line, and then I'm going to sew maybe 3/8 of an inch away from the line because I don't want to waste this piece of fabric here. This is the sew and flip method where you would sew along this edge, cut this part off, and then you end up with a unit that looks like this. But I don't want to waste this piece of fabric here on the edge. So I'm going to put that second seam in and then cut them apart. So I'm going to go over to the machine and do that. I'll come back and show you what I mean, and we'll have the first units made for the 3-course meal table runner. I've sewn the seam down the marked diagonal line across my background square, and you can see if I fold that over, I'm going to have the nice sew and flip unit for my project. I also put in a second seam, and I don't know if you can see it on camera or not. I was aiming for about 3/8 of an inch. It probably should have been about 1/2 an inch, but I think mine's actually turned out to be a little bit skinny, but I'll make it work. And now I'm going to cut this apart. I'm going to lay my ruler right between those 2 seams. So my seam allowance isn't quite as large as I would normally like it, but we'll make it work. Cut that apart. So now I have my sew and flip unit for the 3-course meal table runner, and I have my bits and pieces unit here, which has already been made into a half square triangle. So I'll do that for all of the others. I'm going to press these seams open just because I like to press my half square triangle seams open to reduce the bulk in the final project. I have Sue to thank for that. Sue, you know who you are. Sue encouraged me to do that years ago, and I found it incredibly frustrating because pressing the seams open is a little bit more time consuming than pressing the seams to one side. But Sue was right, and it is a much better approach to keeping the seams nice and flat. And as you may see in a video that I have on my obsession with Elizabeth Hartman fabrics, pressing the seams open can be really, really useful if you've got loads of little pieces and are trying to reduce the bulk in your project. So I'm going to do this for all of this unit. The other piece that we need for this project is to sew the other contrasting fabric with background squares, and this is just a simple 2-patch unit. So we'll sew those and then show you how to make the rest of the block for this table runner. With the pieces sewn, I can now start to assemble the block. So I have my sew and flip units with the seams pressed open, and I have 4 of those. And I have 4 fabrics sewn to backgrounds, just a simple 2-patch block, and those I've just pressed to the dark side. And then I also have my bonus blocks. These are the 4 pieces that were cut off from the sew and flip units. I've pressed those seams open as well. I will square those up and I'll put those aside for the bonus project that I'll show you at the end of the video. So the next step is to sew these together, and it's really quite simple. We'll take one of each of the 2 units and sew them together like this, and then we'll repeat that for each of the 4 blocks. And then once the 4 blocks are done, our section of the table runner gets formed just by spinning each of these around. So your block gets laid out like this. I like the focal point in the center that's created when these triangles all come together. And then it's just a nice simple block, and we're going to make 3 of those for this table runner. I'm going to go to the machine and sew these units together and then sew the whole block together, and then I'll show you how to put the rest of the table runner together. And so this is the final block for the 3-course meal table runner. It becomes a simple 4-patch once you have each of the units constructed. And you can see on the back that I've pressed the seams to the dark side, except in the instance where I press these seams open. There's a few bulky little points here, but it's still a nice and neat finish, so I'm happy with that. Now for the pattern as I've written it, you'll need to make 3 of these. And then once the 3 are finished, they get sewn into a row. This final block is 12.5 inches square. And so from my background fabric, I've cut a 12.5 inch sashing strip and finished the other 2 blocks, as you can see here. So the sashing strip goes between each of the blocks. So I'll add this 3rd one I just made onto the end here. And then to finish the table runner, I'll add another 2.5 inch strip on each of the long sides, and then a 2.5 inch strip on each end in order to finish the table runner. You'll see in the instructions that instead of putting a 12.5 inch strip on both ends before doing the long sides, I recommend that you do the long sides first. That way you won't have to piece that strip. It works out to about 40 inches long, but if you add the side sashing strips on first, then that strip becomes longer than the average length of fabric and you'll have to piece the section. So I'll show you what I mean as I sew this together and then sew on the borders for the table runner. I have the 3 squares sewn together across the entire table runner, and the last step is to add the final borders. So as I said earlier, you want to add the long side borders first. If your measurements are perfect, your long side borders should be cut at 40.5 inches, but always double check. If your seam allowances are slightly larger or slightly smaller, you might want to cut those strips at a slightly different size in order to fit the table runner that you're making. But mine work out to 40.5 inches, which, given the length of the fabric that I'm using, the background fabric, that means I can use it from just a single strip, that I don't have to piece those strips together. So this strip here of background fabric is long enough to go onto both of those sides. So I'll cut it to the right length, use clips or pins to pin it on, and then sew it together. And I have an example right here of what that will look like. So the long sides have been added first, and then I added another piece here. These are 16.5 inches after the long borders have been added. And that finishes the table runner. It's actually quite simple, and it looks maybe a little bit plain now, but I think with a dark binding, you'll see that that makes a real difference to the final product. So I have the binding cut and prepped here. And once I layer it all together and quilt it, and then sew that nice dark binding on the edge, it'll be a nice dramatic finish to the final table runner. Now this is a 3-course meal. If you want a 5-course meal or a 7-course meal or a 4-course meal, depending on the size of the table that you're making your table runner for, all you need to do is add another one of these units, or 2 or 3, depending on how big you want to make your project. You will then have to piece your long and short borders together from multiple strips, but this pattern can be sized quite easily, I think, to suit a much, much longer table. So I encourage you to take a look at the table, take a look at the finished size, and see how that might fit with the table that you're looking to make a table runner for. Now you may be wondering what we're going to do with the offcuts that we talked about earlier in the episode. And so let me show you what that is leading to. One block, so one block here, that will result in 4 offcuts, in 4 bits and pieces as a result of the sew and flip method. So here's the 4 that I demonstrated earlier in the video. But across a 3-block table runner, I'll end up with 12 of these. And 12 of these, when all squared up, with a couple of extra pieces of background fabric and then sewn together, will create this cute little block. So I've just squared these up and then laid them together into this design. And so one table runner will give me 1 of these, but 3 table runners will give me 3 of these. And so I have lots of friends and family that may enjoy a table runner for their table. So I will be making 3 of these table runners, and I will then be able to create 3 of these leftover blocks, which will then form their own table runner, and I will have absolutely no waste. Now, if you only want to make 1 table runner, then you'll have 1 of these. And there's lots of things you could do with this. You could finish this up as a little decorative table topper, a little section, a little thing on the top of your table. I wouldn't put anything hot on it unless you put that metallic heat stuff inside it. But if you just put regular backing and a batting on this, this could be a cute little mug rug for somebody's office. It could be a cute little thing on the table to put a vase on top of. I think there's lots of uses that you could do with this. So I encourage you to save your offcuts and your bits and pieces to make something else from this project. Thank you for watching the video for the 3-course meal table runner. I hope you saved your leftover bits and pieces and were able to turn them into the bonus block I showed you in the video. This is my bonus table runner. I made 3 that were all the same and was able to get the 3 bonus blocks to make this other little table runner, which I think turned out really, really well. Thanks very much for watching, and don't forget to make the most of your fabric bits and pieces.